we have to make a transition of thinking like a human being and start thinking like a soul, or thinking about our lives from God's perspective. Because things that may look meaningless from the human perspective, from the individual life perspective, can be saturated with meaning at a larger metaphysical level, a larger spiritual level.
In your book, Life Cycles, you introduced the notion of the Oversoul. And I wonder if you can speak some to that and how the Oversoul plays its role, in your view, in the afterlife.
When I use the term, which has been, in esoteric literature, very common, the Oversoul, the Seth material, it's there. I kind of have used the term soul in two different ways. Our soul is usually thought of as the conscious entity, which is the holder of my individual life experience. So Chris Bache's soul is the psychological construct, the consciousness construct that holds all of my life experience. The being that I return to, the being that planned my reincarnation, is much, much larger than I am. And so this larger soul is often called the Oversoul. So the Oversoul is really the soul which holds the memories of all of our incarnations through time. Now, eventually, after finishing writing that chapter, towards the end of the book, I said, I'm just going to call that entity the soul. And I would capitalize it to differentiate it from soul with a small s, which is my personal self-identity. But soul with a capital S is the 100,000-year-old being, the soul which chooses my incarnation and which receives my incarnation back. Because the vast majority of our consciousness and our learning doesn't incarnate in any lifetime. Michael Newton says if we were to incarnate all of the soul's power in one lifetime, all of its substance, it would basically short out our circuits. He thinks we incarnate maybe 5 to 15 max % of the power of the soul. And I think something like that is true. However, I think we are moving into a point in humanity's larger story, evolutionary story, that we are moving into a time when I think the soul is waking up inside humanity, so that there is a process in which we are moving towards greater and greater incarnation of greater quantity of our total soul identity in our historical incarnations.
It's interesting. I love the fact that you used percentages, so I'm going to stick with that for a moment. And I think I'm going to use the Oversoul and soul language just to make it easily distinguishable for our conversation. But in this moment, there's Chris, the soul, who's here talking to me in 2025 on Insights at the Edge. What percentage of you do you feel is in that ray, if you will, of sunlight, of the Oversoul sun? Like, do you feel more of that? Could be, you can access it, it's present, you can tune into it and feel it, or no, 5 to 15% is pretty good, Tammy, come on. Or no, I feel that ancient hundreds of thousands. I can touch it.
Yeah, I think we can. I mean, once you kind of have a vision, an understanding of the structure of how life works, how reincarnation is a cycle, but it accumulates in spiritual reality as well as in physical reality. But once we have that, then opens up the possibility that I'm in Earth, I've chosen the circumstances of my life, but I would like to remember more of who I am. I would like some deeper guidance from the higher intelligence, the higher soul, to help guide me in my actions in this lifetime. And we have all sorts of technologies that allow us to do that, all sorts of exercises. Meditation would be an exercise. Hypnotherapy would be an exercise. Even working with yoga, working with psychedelics puts us in contact with our soul consciousness. And then you can go beyond soul consciousness into the larger web of consciousness that the soul is part of. Yeah.
Now, I have to ask this question one more about choosing our lives, because
Okay.
for those of us who have a sense of, I think I might have chosen my life, but why would I choose a life that had so much suffering in it? Really?
Yeah. Really?
Like those parents that I had, really? I mean, maybe the case and maybe something else for someone, or
Yeah.
some early trauma that was terrible, or a later trauma. Why would I choose that?
Yeah. I don't want to make light of any of these, any of suffering. I mean, I don't, and I think I get very angry when I hear people pronounce how suffering works, or, makes large metaphysical pronouncements on it. I think we have to be very respectful of suffering, and yet at the same time hold out the hope that this suffering has significance. It's that the suffering is meaningful in a larger uh, landscape. And I take great encouragement as I studied the past life therapeutic literature, and I watched therapists basically following a present pain in a person's life and letting it unfold into a deeper story that has been moving through several lifetimes up to this lifetime. Time and again, people have been able to take their pain to its source, in which it's anchored in experiences that they don't remember having, but because they come from another lifetime. And in that remembering, it provides a freedom and a release from suffering in their current lifetime. So when you see that happening over and over again, it supports the conclusion that this suffering is, I don't want to say intentional, but it's accepted as a circumstance of learning. And then we would ask, you're asking, why would we ever want to learn? What do we have to learn from those horribly depleted or compromised lives? And I think we have to make a transition of thinking like a human being and start thinking like a soul, or thinking about our lives from God's perspective, because things that may look meaningless from the human perspective, from the individual life perspective, can be saturated with meaning at a larger metaphysical level, a larger spiritual level. And sometimes I think, for example, some people have voluntarily taken on pain, memories, which are not part of their personal karmic lineage. Sometimes, I mean, in my psychedelic practice, I found that a lot of the work I was doing, a lot of the purging of negative karma, was not personal. It was collective. And I think that I think many of us are actually living lives which are serving the release of trauma from the collective psyche, which goes beyond simply healing the personal psyche. So I think we have to learn to think in a much more expanded framework to even address suffering.
Discover on-demand videos and docuseries, explore a full schedule of daily life classes, and become part of an incredible community. At Sounds True One, we invite you inward to find your way, your way.